Hey everybody, this is Emric from Wicked Rails Roller Coasters, and today I will be starting a new series of roller coasters on this channel. And to start off, I will be reviewing the Comet at the Great Escape in Queensbury, New York. This coaster is by far my favorite at the park, which otherwise is pretty underwhelming to be completely honest. So, they have a really nice wooden coaster, but it's hidden all the way in the back. And it's another inconvenience, and that's not the coaster's fault, it's the park's fault that they put their one really good coaster all the way in the back, and that's one of a few complaints I have about this coaster. But I'm going to talk about the pros before the cons. Some of the pros are just the airtime on this thing is insane, and for a roller coaster that doesn't have a major drop, with a drop of only 87 feet and a height of 95 feet and a speed of only 55 miles an hour, but it lasts 2 minutes, and that really shows how great this layout is. For just an out and back coaster, it's really well made. And it's a double out and back, so you go away from the station and back, and then you do it again. And it's very well made. I love this coaster. I've been riding it since I was a very young kid. And the chain lift is probably one of the worst parts of the ride. If you ask me, 3 years ago, I would say that, but they significantly sped up that lift, and now you're up there in like 10-15 seconds, which is great because it used to be excruciatingly slow. And I understand that because it was relocated from Crystal Beach in Ontario, Canada, and it had existed for a long time. It's one of the oldest operating coasters in the world, and it's a very underrated coaster. And if you do have to go to the Great Escape, you can't miss out on this ride. Even though it's at the worst Six Flags park, you cannot miss out on this ride. It's by far their best coaster, and a lot of people complain that it's rough, and I would have agreed a couple years ago, but they recently retracked part of it because I had an injury because it was so rough. I actually almost broke my back on this, so they had to just retrack a very minor part of it, but that minor part was extremely rough, and that honestly changed everything. A lot of people don't even know that this happened because it wasn't really reported on because it was so minor, and it happened, I think, 3-4 years ago. It was a little while ago, but there was a bend towards the end where you come back towards the station before a couple airtime hills, and it was really rough. Almost broke my back, but that's a story for another day. And the airtime on this is fantastic. Honestly, it's fantastic, and I cannot say how great the airtime on this ride is. It's ejector airtime, and it is there, and it is good. There's one somewhat major drop. I mean, like, what do you expect from this kind of coaster? You can't really get incredibly high drops because it's an old one. But 87 is not bad for a coaster. 87 is not bad. Close to a 100-foot drop. And honestly, I can't praise this coaster enough because it's been operating somehow, some way at this park that's pretty clearly underfunded. Because it's a very small park with like 3 good rides. Not gonna lie, there's very few good rides here, and most of them are flat rides. So Comet really stands out from the rest of the coasters at this park because they only have one coaster by a major manufacturer. Besides aerodynamics, they have a ton of aerodynamics here, and then they have a Vekoma and an Intamin, but the Intamin is a bobsled. So, but this ride, Comet, really stands out, because it's just such an incredible ride, and you can't get enough of it. This is a very marathonable coaster. You could sit down and just keep staying on it if no one's in line waiting. You could just keep looping back around because it's worth it. It's worth it. And I understand that because the Great Escape is my home park, people wouldn't expect me to say anything bad about their one good coaster. No, there are some bad things about this coaster. Like mainly the location. It is in the very very back of the park, which is not something that should be the case because it is way way too far back because a lot of people just go to the Great Escape, specifically enthusiasts. If they're going to ride Comet and pretty much nothing else. Because Steven Demon is rough, not a good coaster. Canyon Blaster is boring, not a good coaster. Uh, Flashback is just a Vekoma Boomerang, and it's rough. And then they have Bobsled and Comet, which are good. And they're both in the very back of the park, and when Bobsled closes before the park does and opens after the park does, and half the time it's closed and has one of the longest lines in the park, obviously people are going to be riding Comet a lot more. And it's you literally have to walk through the water park to get to the Comet. Like, and that's the most annoying part because you're trying to go down to ride a roller coaster, and you have to, instead of going and staying in one area and where most of the coasters are located, you have to go all the way to the back of the park. And next year, if they add something good, hopefully they will, because the past few years when they've added a new ride to the Great Escape, it's been a boring flat ride. They've had two not boring ones. One of them is a pendulum ride, and it's good. It's actually really good. And then they have a fireball type thing, and it's called Grease Lightning. And those are like the only two that are remotely okay. And then I haven't been so far this season because I've just been opting into going to New England instead, and that's practically my home park now because I barely ever go to the Great Escape. There's not enough thrills there. But overall, it's a good park. Like, I'm not saying it's a bad park. Six Flags does what it can, but they need to add something better. And I hope that when they do, it's this next season for 2019, they add a new roller coaster, because we need one, at least 100 feet, and maybe by B&M or Intamin. I would normally just say Intamin, but since they already have the bobsled, I don't think they would ask for another Intamin coaster till they get a B&M there. So we'll have to see what they do, but nonetheless, this is a review of the Comet. And one more complaint I have about this ride is the restraints. The restraints are good, but the seats are narrow. They are so tiny. It's like it's meant for a toddler to ride. They are really, really narrow seats. And you get thrown around like crazy, and you're going to keep hitting your side against these, like, armrests or whatever. And it's just not good design for seats. And they need to get new trains for this with new restraints and new seats. Like, they have a lap bar, great, good for them. And then they have these tiny little seats, and they're so small that you really, like, once you sit down, you can't lift the seat belts up because you're sitting on them. And you literally, like, you can't reach underneath because the seats are so small. So you have to stand up, grab the seat belts, hold them, and then sit down. It's such a pain. And honestly, I can't imagine what it's like if you're a much bigger person, because you probably are more uncomfortable than most on this coaster. But, like, other than that, it's overall a really good coaster. And I'm going to be rating these coasters out of 10. I'd give this coaster, I'd rank it pretty high. Like I said, there's very few problems. I'd probably give it an 8.5. We'll give it an 8.5. But honestly, really, really solid ride. And they should have it more clearly displayed. They need to give this coaster the praise it deserves, because right now it's not getting it. It's not getting it at all. And it's in a really bad location. That should be fixed. It's in, like, they just need to add more near it. They need to make it a better location, because a lot of people will just go for the water park. And it's very annoying when people who are soaking wet coming from the water park just get on the Comet, and I don't know how often this happens to other people, but the seats are wet. That's annoying too. But overall, just looking at this coaster from a standpoint, the most annoying thing about the coaster besides the location is the seats, and it was really rough for a long time, and it still is rough in some sections. But overall, Philadelphia toboggan coasters did really, really well on this, and it deserves more praise than it gets. So I'm going to give it an 8.5, and I'll see you all in the next video.